Good evening, friends, and welcome. Stephen Manning here, Integrity Ireland, S.O.S, which obviously stands for Save Our Souls, or Stephen on Sunday, or Sowing of Seeds, and other acronyms such as that. Now, I'm not trying to ambush people by doing this at almost different times every week. Danny and myself were traveling yesterday, so I had to postpone it. We're pretty close to 7 o'clock now, guys. Only 10 past 7 here. We've already got somebody on board. Great. Well done, guys. The question, the obvious introduction here I have to start with is to explain to people the original principle and the meaning of life, number 3. Now, I was talking about previously, I would talk a lot about current events. Hello, John. Good to see you, buddy. I would be talking about current events, and invariably I'd lead it back to this idea of the original principle. Very simply, guys, this is the 3rd live stream in a row, and we'll keep numbering them in sequence so that if somebody comes on board and they're a little bit curious about what this is all about and they want the fuller explanation, they can go back to the previous week's videos. All right, so I'll keep running them in this sequence, and what I'll try to do each week is give a very brief summary of why we're talking about this, because to put it in a nutshell, and excuse my lack of academic modesty here if you like, but my take on this is the more of us that understand what this original principle is, the quicker we're going to understand how human society is actually supposed to be, and we'll be able to identify where we're going right and where we're going wrong with far more clarity. And of course, the more of us that understand this original principle, the less of us will be arguing about, sort of subjective viewpoints and belief systems and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's start here and just make sure I've got enough power on for today. So we'll start here with a quick recap by having a look at this overview slide, which covers most of what we've covered already. All right. Now, first of all, over there on the right, that's us promoting a book called The Color of Truth, Volume 1. This was actually first published, getting close to now, about 30 years ago. But it talks about the triadic archetype, which is actually the basis for this original principle. So although I don't use the term original principle in that book, there's a lot of solid information in there leading up to an understanding of what this original principle is, but in due course we will produce a book on these slides that we're doing. So starting left to right at the top, that there is the electromagnetic spectrum, and the point I've made is that at the beginning we're told there was a big bang. What's the big bang? It's a huge burst of energy and light. Good evening, Philomena, nice to see you. We will, by the way, we'll get to a couple of last week's questions after a few slides. All right, guys? So the basic theory here is that we're all made of light, okay? Literally and physically, not just us, but everything in the known universe. It originated in this big burst of light, or if you believe in scripture, when God said, let there be light, okay? The Big Bang. I'm saying it's basically the same notion, the same idea. And if we can understand the qualities of light really clearly, we can actually apply this to all aspects of human nature, society, and in particular to the notions of good and evil. We'll understand what it is. So the basic concept is that there's this spirit, the mind, and the body, okay, in descending order: first spirit, then mind, body, which in turn equates to concept, plan, and action, which also equates to deity or source, feminine and masculine. And if you've been following us now the last couple of weeks, I put quite a few of these slides up explaining in detail why this is so. Okay, so I'm saying that this logo top right equates to the symbol for a child of God, if you like. Okay, it's the spirit with the feminine guiding the masculine. All right, now don't get excited about that, because none of us are perfect. Okay, then just below it, guys, you see the Greek notion of a soul. It comprised 50% fire and 50% water. That was their idea, the ancient Greeks. And they called that atom. And then very interestingly, as I've shown you in previous slides, the breakdown of the atom, we'll look at that again today in a little bit more detail, because today we're talking about the scientific proofs that this thing actually exists, this original principle, okay? So the breakdown of the atom can also be divided into feminine and masculine properties, protons and neutrons surrounded by electrons, which equates in turn to what we would call an atomic family. Masculine, feminine, husband and wife, if you like, male and female, bounded by what? By love. That's the connection with spirit, you see, and the deity, the source, okay? And there at the bottom, we also drifted into the story of the Garden of Eden, with the tree of life representing Adam, and the tree of wisdom, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil, representing Eve, okay? And we talked about myths and all the rest of it, and Eden, of course, would be the encompassing surrounding thing. And then finally, over there on the right, we have at the bottom, let me just enlarge a little bit. Oh yes, genetics and physiology equates to the masculine aspect, the body, right? Spirit, mind, body. Learning and environment, that's what affects our mind growing up. And ultimately at the top, we have a personal choice. So this is one of the theories that says that even if your genetics and physiology is all mixed up or messed up, and even if your environment that you grow up and the things you learn are not accurate, true, or perfect, we still have a personal choice. And that's where soul and conscience meet, and where we've got to try and do what is right. Okay, so let's pop to the next one. Hello, Stephen. How are you doing? You too, buddy. Oh, by the way, if we get any questions that I feel are really pertinent, I can see them coming up in the side here. Some are on YouTube, some are on Facebook. I will fire them across and we'll discuss them. But this is just today, all we're doing now is a recap. All right, so there, that first slide, and feel free, guys, if you want to freeze these and have a look at them later in more detail, of course, go ahead. Let's keep this firing away. So what existed in Eden? Now, I know that Eden is a myth, okay? We call it a cosmogenic myth, I think is the term. It means a sort of a creation story. How did it all begin? That sort of thing, right? But here are some of the triads that make up this original principle. Only some of them. And this is what existed in Eden. So we'll read through them, guys, okay? First of all, God, Eve, and Adam. And they have to be in this order, guys. Deity, woman, and man. Spirit, mind, and body. Concept, plan, and action. The garden, the tree of knowledge, the tree of life. Origin, feminine and masculine. Truth, wisdom, and activity. Eternal, internal, and external. Source, alignment, and connection. Love, beauty, and creativity. Electrons, neutrons, and protons equals the original principle. All right, so just again, we're just recapping. You notice actually the slides that I have them bordered there in purple. This is to show you that it's a recap. And if you want more detail, go back to the previous week and have a look at that. We also discussed briefly the atomic structure. Now, the sort of childish looking drawings were done by me 25, 30 years ago to put into that book. And it would only be later, as you can see, I would discover these other diagrams in the scientific manuals online. And you can see there's a direct, exact correspondence. Okay, so I had to learn this stuff when I was investigating symbolism, all right? But very simply, what makes a proton masculine is the fact that it has 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. And what makes the neutron feminine is that it has 1 up quark and 2 down quarks. All right, I hope I got that right. Okay, but you can see there by the diagram, they all correspond, guys. And then they're held together by what? Electrons, all right, buzzing around them, all right? In the simplest of atoms, it's a proton, a neutron, and 1 electron. That's what holds it together, okay? Interestingly, carbon and so on, we might have a chance to have a look at those today. So hope that's nice and clear. The symbolism keeps on repeating itself. Now, here's one of the slides that you haven't seen before. This is a collection of scientific snapshots from the internet, except for the one right in the middle, the one with the big arrow. That's me. That was my original drawing, explaining that at opposite ends of the spectrum, you have deep reds and deep blues. This is what we can see, all right? And they are measured, okay, in nanometers. So deep red is 700 nanometers and deep blue is 400 nanometers. And these numbers repeat uncannily and repeatedly in scripture, in mythology, and in human history. It's really very, very fascinating, okay? And one of the, I suppose, the suggestion I'm positing is that the suggestion I'm positing is that the reason these numbers keep appearing with uncanny consistency and without any proper explanation. You ask your Bible scholars, for example, to explain, excuse me, both me and Danny are coughing here. You ask the average Bible scholar to explain why, let's say, Moses was a prince in Egypt for 40 years, and then he went out in the wilderness for 40 years, and then he's leading the Israelites to Canaan for 40 years. Why 40? And they'll come up with all sorts of novel and intriguing explanations. But the simplest one is because that corresponds to the blue end of the spectrum, the feminine end of the spectrum, and it signifies a rebirth or a birth of something, okay? This is why, for example, women are pregnant for how long? 40 weeks, all right? It's also, for example, why, and I'm the first person, I think, who ever discovered this, that Jesus was actually in the tomb, according to scripture, okay, whether you consider it a myth or made up stories or whatever. The interesting thing is all of the symbolism is locked in there, not just in the Bible, but in various other scriptures and many, many ancient stories and myths, you know. And how long was Jesus in the tomb? Everyone says 3 days. It wasn't actually, guys. It was 40 hours. And again, there's a reason for that. Then he's alive another 40 days before the ascension. You have to understand, guys, there's something going on. And the one thing it all draws us back to is the properties of light itself, okay? So the symbolism has to come before the activity. Again, there are reasons for this that we get into as we trundle along with the successive slides. So anyway, feel free to freeze that. There's all these proofs. What I'm telling you is absolutely spot on, scientifically accurate truth. And there we go again. There's another 4 of them, all right? Which, again, just showing us where is visible light. Well, it's on this spectrum that we call the electromagnetic spectrum. And the simple theory, which was novel when I first wrote it about 25 years ago, the simple theory, hi, Ida, and let's see, a couple of others there I'm saying hello to, yeah. Ida and Susan, hello again, and Mr., I'm assuming, Mr. Gilchrist. The point I was making when I first came up with this novel idea was, well, hold on a minute. We've got all this other stuff on the electromagnetic spectrum, you know, radio waves, which affect our emotions, you know, X-rays that can be used in medical practice, ultraviolet, I think they can use to harden enamel on your teeth and things like that, and so on. Of course, TV, radios, all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, look, if those other things can be having physical and emotional, psychological effects on us, and then why couldn't color be doing the same? It's a very simple sort of, and it's since been generally accepted. There's many, many books now have been written in the past 20 years about color psychology and things like that, okay? You don't put aggressive mental patients into a red room, for example. They can predict that it's good, they're going to kick off if you do that. You try and find a room that's pale blues. Why? Because blue is the feminine, cooling colors. All right. So I hope I'm making my point, guys. Right. Now here again, the physical, right. This is intriguing because one of the first questions that popped up, even when I was doing my own research, I was going, oh, this original principle, blah, blah, blah. And I went, oh, sort of, damn it. Nature, by and large, is all bloody well green, you know. What a bloody nuisance. You know, it'd be much better if it was reflecting purple or something, because purple is a mixture of blue, red, blue, and white, you see. And then I looked into it in more detail. And here now, I've put these 2 slides together in order, you know, and added to it to try and create a simple explanation. In fact, the reason that leaves are green is because the leaves are absorbing the red and the blue wavelengths. Now, isn't that interesting? So they're absorbing the feminine and masculine wavelengths at the end, at either end of the spectrum, okay? And green is the color that is actually bounce off, and we see the green. So we think, well, we say the leaves are green, and they are to all extents and purposes. That's what we see, okay? But the reason they're green is because the red and the blue wavelengths do not bounce off them. They get soaked up. So here we have plant life corresponding to this original principle as well. I hope this makes sense, guys. And obviously over there on the right-hand side, photosynthesis, okay? I think that's a tomato plant, right? So simple explanation again. If I take one of those tomatoes and eat it, you ask yourself, okay, that tomato then becomes part of me, does it not? Yeah, as I digest it and it goes into my bloodstream and all the rest of it. Okay, prior to that though, how does the tomato grow? And the simple answer is sunlight. The sunlight is absorbed by the leaves, water is sucked up by the roots, and they produce fruit. Yeah. And water, again, is officially it's on the blue end of the spectrum. Fire and heat and all that would be on the red end of the spectrum, okay? So I hope, again, I'm making this point. Let's see, I'm sort of not sure what's coming with each one. All right, and here's a little bit more proof. Excuse me, guys, a little bit of a throat. And again, you can see this is straight off the internet, guys. Do plants absorb all types of light equally? All right, so this is Science Insights, if you want to go and check it out. And underlined, I say, plant leaves absorb roughly 90% of the red and blue light that hits them. All right, so it's not me saying it, guys, it's right there, okay? And then down the bottom here, wavelengths of light and photosynthetic pigments. Plants absorb light primarily in the blue 400 nanometers and red 700 nanometers spectrums, which are crucial for photosynthesis. So here we are, guys, I'm bringing you back to the concept that this original principle, as I'm explaining it to you, is fundamental to all human life. Not just humans, but animals, plants, everything, the whole lot, okay? I hope I've sort of hammered home that, theme, all right? Now, this is a slide. I'll have to do a bit more work on this, okay? You may or may not have ever heard of this, but there's this concept called toroidal shapes. Okay, now a toroidal shape, as you can see right here, it's like it starts in the middle. All right, the energy starts in the middle, bounces out, comes around, and comes back in underneath. Apparently, the Earth has these energy fields around it. I think the one center top is supposed to be the Earth, but apparently it's also in atoms and molecules and all this sort of stuff. And there we have, now I'm not going to go into great depth into this today because truthfully, when I first discovered this, it's not as fresh in my mind as it needs to be for me to be sharing it with you all. But again, it's just to emphasize, and as you can see here, by coincidence, by happenstance, the artists who drew these images decided to put them in blue and in red. Interesting, is it not? Yeah. And even if those of you remember the stories in the Matrix, do you remember the Keanu Reeves in that famous movie, The Matrix, which is all about the system controlling us? It just so happens to be he has a choice between the red pill or the blue pill. Do you remember that? Yeah. Again, I'm saying some of it, of course, could be pure coincidence. But as Carl Gustav Jung said, and I think in the very first or both number 1 and 2 slides that we did on this presentations, when coincidences keep happening, they are not coincidences. There's a reason for it. We've just got to keep searching and researching until we find out what that reason is. Okay. The whole point is to try and get you to sit up and go, could Manning be right here? Could there be some sort of universal archetype that we're all, an archetype, remember guys, I explained this to you before, an archetype is, I'm just going to take this one out for a second, see if I can pull myself up just solo for a second. Can I pull myself up? Yeah. So, oh, there's Danny in the background. Danny, do you want to give us a wave? Or he's got his earphones. Hi, Danny. Looks like a Hitler salute. Interestingly, because we've got the Nazis coming up in a minute. All right, so I'll just turn it away so we're not distracted. So archetypes, very simply, guys, archetypes are these notions in psychology that were first articulated by Carl Gustav Jung. And very simply, they are themes and ideas that influence us as individuals and as a species collectively. And often we don't know what's happening. It's subconscious, subliminal most of the time. It's a complicated field to sort of understand. But what makes this original principle, which is an archetype, okay, what makes this unique and novel is that, as far as I am aware, and I studied psychology to a high level at one point, guys, as far as I'm aware, this is the first ever example of a substantial archetype. In other words, it's not something that you talk about and you say, well, there's sort of proofs of people have dreamed about this and other people have reported that. It's all sort of conjecture and speculation based on, tests that are done in psychology labs or whatever, in interviews. But this is a substantial archetype, which I think is almost a contradiction in terms. If it's substantial, you could argue it's not an archetype. And I'm saying, no, that's the beauty of this thing. It's definitely an archetype because it's surrounding us in all sorts of dimensions, and it's there present right the way through history and mythology and science and nature and everything. And we haven't even known it. The authors of scripture, the authors, the painters of great paintings, they're actually following the guidelines of this original principle archetype, and they don't even know they're doing it. That's what's fascinating about this. We'll see a little bit more about that now in a minute. So let's pop our you saw the devil and the Nazis there. Let's get them back up. Let's see how big is that. All right. Now, I'm just asking the question: is this coincidence? All right. Now, again, this top slide there is from the book. So some 25 odd years ago, one of the things that I struggled with was realizing that if you could say such a thing as a perfect male, right? What colors would the perfect male be represented in? And the answer to that would be red and white, which interestingly, if you think about it, if you look at a picture of Jesus, how many times is he in red and white? Yeah. Very, very interesting, guys. There's other archetypal, like Santa Claus, for example. I know it's to do with Coca-Cola and everything, but he's also in red. You see, we're doing it. We're picking it for a reason, guys. But the point I want to make here, probably more important than looking at because when we'll do one of these presentations soon, and it'll be specifically about what I call the providence, guys, which is a plan. Hello, Maureen, nice to see you. A plan, okay, let's not even try and name it, guys. There's a plan to move humanity back into alignment with this original principle. And it follows these patterns, the numbers, the colors of this original principle. And it's unfolding as we speak. There's a reason the world is in such turmoil at the moment, guys, as we approach 2030 and the second 2000th year anniversary of the start of Christ's public mission, for example. It all knits together in such a cohesive narrative that if you bear with me, guys, and let me show you week after week after week, the penny will drop. And I'm sure even already some people are going, oh my God, this is unusual. Yeah, he's making a point here. Yeah, he's making an interesting point. Now, obviously, when you get white, this has to be clarified, all right? White can either be the presence of the color white, as we see with the atoms and with the original principle logo, or it can just be the absence of color, all right? The absence of color altogether. It's in some cases, such as in these neo-Nazi flags, you say, oh, there's white in that. That's got to mean the Spirit of God. No. In this case, obviously, it doesn't. So I've got here in the middle, black equals the absence of light. Now, again, this is scientific fact, guys. If you've got a pot of black paint, all right, and you use that's pigment, okay? But black, when we're talking about light, black is the total absence of light and color, all right? So it's a very strong negative. It's the absence of light. And if you equate light, especially white light, to the spirit, to the deity, all right? You see where it starts to come together. And then you say, well, okay, whatever happened in the Garden of Eden and something went wrong, What was it? And we now know, well, the man and the woman separated from what? The spirit. Okay? And what was in its place? Well, we know the story of Cain, who was the murderer, not a nice guy, kills his own brother and all the rest of it. So here I'm saying, okay, if you have black equates to the dark spirit, call it Satan if you like, the Lucifer figure, whatever, the fallen angel, interestingly, Lucifer means angel of light, or the light bringer. That's what it actually means. But he was described as having fallen from this wondrous position that he had, because he interfered in God's directions to Adam and Eve, right? That's the story we're told. And I know there's a few threads we've got to pull at, and we'll look at a couple of them here in a moment. I do apologize, because there's a little frog in the throat. So I'm suggesting, as you can see here, from left to right, if I bring it up a little bit, just a little bit bigger, from left to right, you've got Count Dracula, all reds and blacks, yeah? You've got Darth Vader, reds and blacks. You've got the typical Satan figure, reds and blacks, and you've got the cartoon villain, reds and blacks. Now, they're just a few examples, but once you prime to this, you start watching movies, especially the older movies, and look how many of them dress the wicked character, the evil character, the anti-hero, in black and red. Even old cowboy westerns and everything like that. The gunslinger for hire, he comes in and he's all dressed in black with a red bandana around his neck, something like that. It's really quite fascinating once you observe it. I also put a caveat in here, guys, is that this color phenomenon, by telling you about this, see if this makes sense. By broadcasting this now and by publishing it in the book, The Color of Truth, Volume 1, by publishing it in that book, and telling people about it, it actually negates the archetypal aspect of anything that comes in future, right? This phenomenon is certainly true up until the 1960s, because this phenomenon is also reflected in the flags of the world, believe it or not, okay? But it's really only up to about the 1960s, okay? It's consistent, and then there's a lot of stuff happens after the Second World War, and arguably some of the nations who could previously be described as being on the right side of history, if you like, have, unfortunately, because they follow diabolical models, they've unfortunately fallen from those positions. But throughout history, generally speaking, I'll give you, for instance, one example, because the Catholic Church, for example, did not recognize women, right? Up until the Protestant Reformation, there's no blue in any of the Catholic Church's iconography. There's no blue in it, and blue is the feminine color, all right? Similarly with nearly all of the Arab Muslim flags up to 1960. You won't find any blue in them, guys. Why? Because they don't acknowledge the feminine in their cultures. Do you understand? So it's really, really quite interesting. And I'll show you this in due course. I'll let you see these and let you see them for yourself firsthand, okay? So I'm suggesting here that this original principle, if you like, the opposite of this original principle, instead of it being spirit, mind, body, which equates to white, blue, and red, right, in the right order on the spectrum, okay, after the fall, the mythological scriptural fall from grace, Adam and Eve are separated from the spirit. So now you have the blue and the red is moved away from the white, all right, and in place of the white comes the dark, the absence of light, the dark, which is represented here by black, okay? And then the masculine, instead of remaining in the subservient position, like your mind directs your body what to do, instead the masculine took over, which is in the Cain and Abel story, the masculine killed the feminine, suppressed the feminine. Abel was in the feminine position as a younger brother looking after sheep. His big older brother killed him out of jealousy and everything. And that was simply because, and again, it's the same story, guys. If you just think about this, how much sense this makes. Why did God say to Cain and Abel, thank you for your offerings, guys. Abel, I can accept your offering. Cain, I can't accept yours. But why is your countenance fallen? Surely do the right thing and all will be well. But watch out, because sin is crouching at your door. What Cain should have done is given his offering to Abel to give to God. because that's the sequence. If Abel is in the feminine position, do you understand? Cain should have given that to Abel. Abel would have offered it to God, and God would have been able to say then, well done, guys, you've got it. You understand this original principle. We can actually restart history at this point. Your parents, messed up, but we can start again with you guys, but that's not what happened, okay? And that's why I call it here black and red equals the dark masculine, the satanic figure, if you like, or the Cain figure. And by no coincidence, scripture or the myths within scripture tell us that Cain actually was the father of human civilizations, in the sense of building the first city, creating the first taxation systems and things like that, which we've still got today, guys. All these big organizations, big institutions, all about forms of keeping us really in control and in a form of slavery. It's all, believe it or not, guys, it's all about this original principle. It's all about stopping us reconnecting with the divine within our own empowered selves. The feminine aspect, the masculine aspect, connected in the right order back to the deity. Then I don't need any authorities to tell me what to do anymore, because I know intuitively, because I'm back connected with the deity, with the source. Okay, everything's working in harmony again. I hope this makes sense, guys. Anyway, as you can see there, those are Nazi and neo-Nazi flags from across the world. There's no doubt there's a few with, random different colors. But again, watch, for example, I think it's Antifa. Right? I'm no fan of Antifa. I'm actually a huge fan of the concept of anti-fascism. But very early on, when we first started seeing them in marches in Ireland, my honest to God, I'm telling you the honest truth here, my first reaction was, great, we've got a bunch of people who are now, they're anti-fascists and they're coming out in the street, wonderful. And then I went, but hold on a minute, they're acting like fascists. They're calling themselves anti-fascists, but they're acting like fascists, And actually, funny enough, the bottom right image there, that is the, if I'm saying it right, the fasces. It's basically a bunch of sticks bound together, and they're very hard to break. It was a symbol of rule in the Roman Empire way back, yeah. And interestingly, the Roman Empire, the colors of the Roman Empire were largely reds and blacks, because it was a male-dominated society again, a warlike thing and all the rest of it. Very interesting. So what have we coming next? I hope the point is made. Now I'm going to look over here. Maureen said something interesting here. I'll pop it up so you can see it, guys, and let's see if, before I even read it, here we go, pop it up and see. Lucifer rebelled against God. St. Michael the Archangel threw him out of heaven. Lucifer now doomed to the flames. Yeah, do you remember, Maureen, and I say this with the greatest respect for various people's belief systems, I try my best not to deal in beliefs, precisely because anybody can believe anything they want. And it's largely our beliefs that are causing the problems in the world. I don't mean just religious beliefs, political beliefs. Everybody has an opinion, and many of those opinions are subjective. Yeah. In other words, they depend on my upbringing, my being brought up as a Catholic, for example, or my training in psychology, and all of those things inform the way I think. What I try to do is look for objective truths. And the beauty about objective truths, such as I'm showing you here tonight, I hope you'll agree, is that it is self-evident. You look at these slides, and I know, of course, I've cherry-picked to make the point, And I'm sure if you go hunting, you'll find, we've got a picture of, we found a painting of Satan here, and he's wearing yellow shorts or something, and a living pink backpack. I don't care. But you will probably find occasional things like that, but it doesn't break the rule, Those are the exceptions to this rule, all right? It's in movies, it's in stories. And on the opposite side, of course, the traditional hero, whether it be Prometheus, whether it be Christ, they often wear red cloaks. And remember I told you before, Adam in Hebrew means red, okay? Very closely related to the name of Adam, of course. Adam and Adam, and other creation stories around the world often have the tree of life, whether it be in the form of a totem pole or the earth that the first man is made of. It's red earth and all this sort of stuff. There's a reason for it, guys. and we haven't spotted it before because we didn't understand this original principle and its connection to the properties of light. Kathleen, Antifa, the real fascists, I agree, Sean. Maureen says, I'll just read this one. As a Catholic, I will always use my faith, but then we all think differently when it comes to belief. Yeah, it's, again, faith, beliefs. I'm not saying they're not necessary. I'm not saying that they're not useful. I'm not saying that many of us depend on our faith and our belief systems to get us through the day and all the rest of it. Now, of course, there's many, many positives to be said for that. But the main point I made, and I think I did a demonstration before, I said, look, if I tell you I've got a pearl in my hand, okay, and half the people in the room say, yeah, we believe you, Stephen, and the other half say, no, we don't believe you, all right? I say, all right, then let's get this clear. You've got two sets of beliefs. One group believes I have a pearl in my hand. The other group believes I don't have a pearl in my hand. So that's two different and opposing sets of beliefs. And if I never open my hand, those two groups can be arguing forever about what they think may be the truth. But if I do open my hand and show the truth, whether I have one or I don't, I then ask the two groups, what just happened to your beliefs? The beliefs are gone. You don't need them anymore. Why? Because you know the truth. So as long as we understand that beliefs are sometimes necessary, but they should really be a holding point while you go looking for the truth. In other words, faith is ratified in truth. This is what I'm saying. Beliefs are ratified in knowledge. Okay? And if they're not ratified, then get rid of them. So, that was a stupid belief. At one point, I believed that the world was flat or something. And then you go in an airplane out of space and you go, oh, what a stupid belief. Get rid of it. Don't need it anymore. But until you know, we do have to hold on to these things. But that'll be a topic maybe for another day, guys. Yeah, you're right, Maureen. The anti-fascists cannot define what a fascist is. Actually, I'll pop this up because I like it. They are utterly beyond all reason. Yeah, absolutely agree, Maureen. And you know what? If you're doing your research, there's enough evidence now to prove that many of them are sort of rent-a-mob types. They're being sent in by dark forces to disrupt and upset, much like the guards sending in their own guys dressed as ordinary members of the public to agitate and give the guards a reason to attack. The British police are doing it as well, okay? What are otherwise legitimate protesters or something like that, So yeah, there's quite a bit of evidence to support the fact that they're funded and organized. And even sometimes if you look at some of these marches and then look at the posters they've all got, right? Someone has printed all those posters out. A lot of them are identical, and handed them out by their dozens or scores, to try and make it more of an impact, It takes a bit of organization, So, yeah, I have no real time for them. They came after me at one point. I managed to find out who they were. And let's just say I had a private discussion with them on their Facebook pages or whatever it was that I was able to find them, and gave them a fright, quoted some law and that they were breaking and everything, and said, right, either cut it out or I'll see you in court for defamation. And they all went very, very quiet. And thank God for that, because I've got better things to be doing, So on to the next slide, guys. How are we doing? Okay. So this was, last week, Joe Whelan made a comment. And again, worth a little bit of a discussion, guys, here today. She said, and she was talking about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and she says, were they not told to go forth and multiply, or did I get that wrong? Now, I didn't have time to discuss this last week. Well, here's my answer. Yes, Joe, good point. In order to fit this idea that sex was at the heart of the fall theory, yeah, one must assume there was context to the go forth and multiply direction, i.e., go forth and multiply when you are ready, okay, in the right sequence, when you're ready, Okay, perhaps. Because the same direction is given to Noah and his family after the flood. Having a sexual fall accommodates a number of conundrums. Number one, kids having kids equals messed up adults. Now, I mean, that's again another self-evident. See, the theory, guys, let me pull you guys back here for a second. The theory, I'll pop myself up full just to talk about this for a second. So the idea that the fall had a sexual component to it fits an awful lot of patterns quite neatly. There is room for discussion and for some argument. But if you think about it, right, if you're a parent, right, let alone the heavenly parent, okay, the deity who's there, and we've got to assume that Adam and Eve are in some state of evolving consciousness. Now, we don't know if Adam and Eve were Neanderthals, whether they came from apes, because the anthropologists tell us that humans have been around for zillions of years or whatever, okay? So the notion that this all happened 4,000 literal years ago, yeah, it's a stretch. But the beauty of it, not 4,000, 6,000 years ago, but the beauty of it is the symbolism all absolutely fits. The symbolism, the time frame, 4,000 years from Christ, from Adam to Christ, you go, there's the 4,000 again, the 400 nanometers. There it is, the big four, Then another 2 up to now, and then we're into the 7th, millennium, which could be the last days and all that sort of stuff when things finally get corrected. There's a lot of strong arguments for it. But the notion is that Adam and Eve were in a stage of growth. They were not complete adults. And just like the explanation was, look, you can do whatever you want, go to all the trees in the garden, you can partake of all of the trees, but do not partake of the fruit. Nothing about an apple. Don't partake of the fruit of what? The tree of knowledge of good and evil, which we equate to Eve and wisdom. All right, wisdom, Eve, the tree of knowledge. That's all about the feminine thing. So the instruction actually wasn't given to Eve, believe it or not, to go forth and multiply. That was said only to Adam. Now, this is quite interesting, guys, okay? So go forth and, was it the, yeah, no, that's, I must get this the right way around. Yes, I believe so. So I'm sorry, guys, just to hesitate. Just had a thought enter my head. Or was the instruction not to partake of the fruit was only given to Adam? I'll have to double check, guys. Oh, I apologize. I hate getting things like this wrong. But anyway, Adam was the only one who received one of those 2 instructions. And then who causes the temptation? Well, the spirit of darkness, whatever we want to call it, didn't go to Adam because it's not the right sequence. He went to Eve because she's in that middle position and corrupted her, tempted her, and she then encouraged Adam to partake of the fruit. Okay, so it makes sense. And we'll go back to the slide now. It makes sense because that would account, first of all, it's a solid rule. If you're a responsible parent, and your kids are growing up and they reach puberty and they start getting interested in the opposite sex. If you're a responsible parent, you're going to say to them, listen, guys, don't be messing around, with your bits, because there could be consequences. You could end up getting pregnant. It's also going to mess your mind up. You'll get addicted or something before you're mature enough to understand it. And also, it's supposed to be a precious, sacred thing between, when I say husband and wife, the couple joined unto God. All right, it's supposed to be this unique bond that holds you together. You start messing around with it before you're mature enough, there's going to be problems. And one of those first problems is, of course, here we go, add to stage, here we go. One of the first problems is kids having kids equals messed up adults. And I'll immediately hold my hand up and say, yeah, that's me. I'm one of those messed up adults. Yeah, because kids having kids, having kids, having kids, Number 2, no spirit, the spirit of God is absent now, right? Because they've been disobedient. So they've now cut themselves off from the spirit. So the concept, see on the left there, concept, plan, and action, the concept is missing now. So that equals centuries of poor mating choices and lots of sexually mixed up people in mind and body, which accounts also for this whole gender fluidity and pronouns and all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there who genuinely believe that they're a man trapped in a woman's body or vice versa, or I've even seen hermaphrodites myself. I've actually met them. I've had dealings with them. These are people who are born with the bits from both sexes, and you're going, what is God up to? This is one of the explanations that accounts for all that, but it also accounts for us to have common sense and not try to force what are departures from the original principle into mainstream thought, especially with the children, and saying, oh, it's all right, we've got all these sort of psychologically and physically mixed up people, and we've got to respect everyone, and we've got to make all of society has to be forced to conform to this, gender fluidity model and everything. That's going against the original principle, guys. Be compassionate, yes. Be thoughtful. Don't, do not treat these people terribly or badly, because literally none of us are perfect. We're all somewhere on this scale of imperfection. It's just that with some people, it's more evident. They feel it more. And they quite rightly, their original mind is saying, you're a precious child of God, you're special, all this sort of stuff. But they should also understand the original principle and know, just like me. Let's say I'm in a habit of losing my temper when I'm driving, right? Let's just say, just as so, it's what we would call a character flaw, right? Because I'm losing my temper and I'm irritating other people and I'm wanting to get angry, maybe I want to punch somebody and all that. And then I start getting in trouble and people complain about my behavior. And then I object and I say, well, hold on a minute. This is the real me. This is me just being honest. You all have to accept that. You all have to change your models of happy society to allow me to lose my temper every day if I feel like it, because that's me being really me. Well, it's not good enough, because what's missing here, you see, is someone said that to me the other day. Oh, you're conflating, being gay with something. I said, no. If you understand this original principle, you realize that there was an original model, the atomic model, this two ends of the spectrum, the masculine, the feminine, the deity. That's the original model. We should be aspiring towards that, even whilst I acknowledge I'm not perfect, spirit, mind, or body. Of course not. Trying, but, obviously falling short. So, but that doesn't mean that I say, well, it's a free for all. Anyone can do what they want. No, because that's a violation of the original principle. And as we'll see eventually, anything that violates the original principle is somewhere on the scale. If you have a scale of good versus evil, it's somewhere heading towards that end of the scale. Okay, guys? And I say that as compassionately as I can. You notice here, and finally, I'll just pull it up again 1 second, guys. So number 3, it accounts also for the highly sexual symbolism of the tabernacle and the temple, etc. But a point worth discussing nonetheless, maybe next week. Now, that's what I said to Joe at the time. Now, you asked me, what's this? The sexual symbolism of the tabernacle and the temple? What are you talking about? Well, remember I said earlier, this idea that there's a providential plan. There's a providential plan that is unfolding. And a big part of that plan was the whole thing with the chosen people, the Israelites, because actually Noah and his family messed up as well, believe it or not, even though the flood had come and cleansed the earth of all these terribly wicked people, the Sodom and Gomorrah types and everything. Noah and his family also mess up in various ways. But that was supposed to be like a restart, of the Adam and Eve story with Noah and his family. And that's why there were 7 members of his family. It's Noah and 3 sons and their wives and Noah's wife. So Noah is the sort of spiritual figurehead, and then he's got 7 people with him. And I'll ask you a question. Well, we all know about the 40 days of rain for the ark, yeah? When it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Why? I'm telling you, because of this original principle, all right? How long did it take him to build the ark? 120 years. What's that going to do? 3 40s. It's the same as Moses' course. Remember that we talked about a bit earlier, okay? 3 40s, 120 years to build the ark. I think I don't want to say something I'm not sure about, but I think he's 600 years old as well when he builds the ark. That equates to the 6 days of creation and so on and so forth. It all knits together, guys. But let me ask you all a question. How many animals, how did the animals enter the ark? And because I can't hear anyone, right, I know I can hear the chorus, The animals went in 2 by 2, hooray, hurrah, whatever it was, okay? So the animals went in 2 by 2. No, they didn't, guys. Only the unclean animals go in pairs. Only. Please check your scripture and read it. And why this is not common knowledge is almost beyond me. Then depending on the version of the Bible you're reading, the animals, the healthy animals, the good animals, so the unclean animals, this would be things like pigs, crustaceans, things that eat, the clean vultures, all that. They go in 2 by 2. The rest of them go in 7s. Interesting, guys, right? They go in 7s. Some scriptures say pairs of 7s, right? So there would be 14 of the animals, but they're male and female pairs, right? And some say just, it says in 7s, okay? So just go and look at it if you don't believe me, guys, just to prove the point. We're coming back to this again. And then, of course, what was the symbol put in the sky? The promise that another flood will never be sent, so we're told in Scripture, is the rainbow, which is what? It's light, scattered light, reflected in all the colors of the rainbow. Deep blues at one end, deep reds at the other. All right? It all starts to make sense, guys. Okay, there's quite a lot of symbolism actually in that story. So here we go, and right, we're down to the last few minutes. I hope that helps answer the question a little bit, Joe. Okay, so my suggestion is that it's highly likely. Because the tabernacle and the temple, come back to this again very quickly. The tabernacle and the temple I mentioned. I think I've got a picture of it coming up, so we'll go to that in a second. But basically, the tabernacle was the box that contained the Holy of Holies, the presence of God, the Shekinah, all right? And it was kept in a tent, and the tent is covered with red, white, and blue animal skins and purple, symbolizing royalty, which is a mixture of those 3 colors, okay? Why red, white, and blue? Nobody's asked the question. Nobody's answered it, okay, yet, all right? Hopefully you'll understand that's what we're talking about. But it's symbolic of a prepubescent child, the tabernacle, all right? Literally, like a body, just when you get to the temple, it's symbolic of both male and female, right? Adult bodies and ovaries and testicles and the whole thing, guys. It's fascinating. Why the sexual element? Because it's all about reversing the fall, right? Symbolism first, then the activity. All right. So how are we doing for time? Yeah, we'll keep plowing through. No, put it back. Why is that not going back there? Let's see. It says remove, add to stage. All right, here we go. So the phrase Noah to go forth and multiply is rooted in Genesis, where God commands Noah and his sons to be fruitful and multiply, emphasizing the importance of family and procreation in God's plan for humanity. But you see, at that point, when he says that to them, they're just getting off the ark, and they're a perfect family again. All right, and then something weird happens with Ham, but we won't cover that today. All right, so he says here, this command reflects a covenant with Noah, establishing him as a new patriarch, akin to Adam. Right. He's similar to Adam, but again, something goes wrong, and signifies a new beginning for humanity after the flood. It underscores the responsibility of humanity to fill the earth with God's image and glory, ensuring the continuation of life and stewardship of creation. Well, you can't do that if you're disconnected from the Spirit, can you? So when you go and choose your mate, ideally, you're being guided by the concept, the divine concept, to pick somebody who's good, righteous, versus just sexy or entertaining. You know what I mean? Okay. The Dáil passed a bill to abolish the mandatory 3-day waiting period for abortion. Oh yeah, I'd forgotten I had this in here, guys. You'll know that I'm very sensitive to the idea of Down syndrome children be aborted out of convenience or inconvenience, But the point I'm trying to make here is that we cannot trust the politicians, guys. There was this safeguard period for abortion, waiting period. I saw a figure. I think it was 4,000 women, when given this mandatory 3-day waiting period. They decided to have abortion, but there was this mandatory 3-day waiting period in it, and 4,000 of them decided afterwards, after the waiting period, no, and they went ahead and they had their children. All right. So the removal of it, why are these people removing this? It's because human life doesn't mean anything to these people. All right. This is all working against this original principle, okay? And these quotes here from Gript, okay, a good source for your news, guys, your Irish news, is just showing you the flip-flopping and how they keep changing their minds. They're voting for a bill 1 minute, and then a few weeks later they vote against it. Clearly they're following an agenda, which is it's not good. You know, they're following an agenda. They're doing what they're told. They're not. And there we are. There's the three different quotes in 2019. And please pay attention, guys. Exactly, this is HSE figures. Exactly 6,666 abortions were officially notified in the Republic of Ireland during. Now, I didn't write this, guys. All right, this is clips. I know these facts, and I just go and find the proof for you. Okay, that's where you can see this. Okay, that was 2019. I'm suggesting that was mass child sacrifice to the bad guys, to dark forces, in advance of the declaration of COVID. All right, it's all part knitted together, guys. 2023. A recent Irish Times poll showed very little support for changes to the law, yet a majority of TDs last night voted to legalize abortion on demand to 6 months, okay, which is far, far more extreme than the 12-week model put before voters in the referendum, okay? And then finally, 2026, the Dáil has passed a bill to abolish the mandatory 3-day waiting period for abortion, a safeguard introduced in the 2018 Abortion Act. All right, it's creeping forwards, guys. Get rid of convenience, licentious sexual activity. Yeah, babies come along, just get rid of them. Thank you, Dermot. He said 10,000. Thank you, Dermot. 10,000 people apparently are women availed of the opportunity to actually have the child and bring it up. Okay, and I can tell you from my own, you know, there's my text has run off. You know. In the Bible, in Genesis 1:8, God commands Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. This command signifies a blessing from God to have dominion over all creatures, fill the earth, blah, blah, blah. And I've written at the bottom, yes, as long as they are godly, original principle families, right? Not encouraging families to grow and spread his creation, yes, as long as they're godly families as opposed to diabolical families, which sadly, unfortunately, it seems that most of us were, or, you know, without knowing it, you know. Finally, we're into the last couple of minutes, guys. So it's Adam. There's the clarity, guys. It's Adam not to eat from the tree of knowledge. All right. It was given before Eve was created. Got it. All right, guys. So there we are. I'm sorry about that lack of clarity at the beginning. So it's Adam that's told not to partake of what? Eve. All right. And it's Satan who comes to Eve because Eve's in the central position connected to the spirit. And it's Satan connects with her first, and then she connects with Adam. Okay, so a spiritual separation from God rather than a literal death. Okay, we talked about the fruit of our womb and all that sort of stuff. Hope I can get through it. I think we're almost finished here, guys. There's the symbolism I was telling you about, why these specific colors, numbers, and themes. There's the tabernacle bottom right. It's just a picture of the internet. Above it is one of the high priests of the temple, who also is dressed in red, white, blue, which equates to purple. All right, they're dressed in these colors for a reason that nobody has explained. I'm saying it's because the original principle is at the heart of this divine plan to get us back to it, and it all make more sense as we go along, guys. All right, I know it's about science today, but sorry, these aren't supposed to be here, guys, but anyway, yeah, no, anyway, we'll last minute. Here we go, guys. Our rights come from God, not government. Okay, that's the satanic model, top-down autocracies that force you and I often to do things that we don't want. Sorry, guys, I have no time to get to the other quotes, but if you want to find us, that's where you can find us, guys. I've got about 20 seconds left just to say thank you for the comments. There's a couple I'll pull out and we'll cover them next week. But I have to now say good night and God bless, friends, and hopefully see you next Sunday.